Well, I hope you are wrapping up July well. This is Weekly News Highlights, where we bring you some of the biggest stories that made the headlines this week. I'm Song Yoo-jin, coming to you from Arirang's virtual studio. We begin with the major shift in the U.S. presidential election as President Joe Biden announced that he'll drop out of the race, passing the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris. With less than 2 weeks until the Democratic Party finalizes its candidate, how did the presidential campaign play out this week? And what does this mean for South Korea? Moving on, North Korea sent hundreds of wasteful balloons to the south this week, with one falling on the grounds of South Korea's presidential office compound. What's behind these continuing bizarre provocations? Finally, one of the world's largest sports events has kicked off. The Paris 2024 Summer Olympic Games began its 16-day run with the opening ceremony on Friday. We have a sneak peek of what you can expect at the 33rd Summer Olympics, from sports to culture. We start this week in the United States. President Joe Biden announced last Sunday he's stepping down from the running and is endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential nominee. In his televised address from the Oval Office on Wednesday, Biden explained his decision was for the betterment of the country. Now, meanwhile, former President and current Republican nominee Donald Trump continued his campaign, now targeting his new potential rival. Cha Yoon-kyung brings us more.
U.S. President Joe Biden gave an address from behind the Resolute desk in the White House's Oval Office, outlining his decision to withdraw from the presidential campaign. Biden said he believed his record and leadership as president were enough to be re-elected. However, he explained that he had made the decision to bring forth a new and younger voice to defend democracy in the U.S.
So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
President Biden did not directly accuse former President Donald Trump during the address. Nevertheless, he reiterated that democracy in the U.S. depended on American voters. Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, saying that he decided to pass the torch to her, as she is an experienced, tough, and capable candidate. He also mentioned that he will focus on his job as president over his remaining 6 months in office, pledging to push for Supreme Court reform and respond to the climate change crisis. In response to this, former President Trump blasted his new opponent in his first rally since Biden's departure, calling Harris an ultra-liberal driving force and a lunatic.
If Kamala Harris gets in, she would be the most radical far-left extremist ever to occupy the White House times 10. There's never been a lunatic like this in the White House, and we've had some bad ones.
It seems that U.S. voters have rallied on both sides as the presidential race continues. According to public opinion polls conducted by CNN, after the candidacy withdrawal by President Biden, the gap between support for Trump and Harris has decreased more than that for Trump and Biden, showing that 49% of those polled supported Trump and 46% supported Harris. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Well, as just shown in the previous report, Vice President Kamala Harris hasn't been nominated officially yet, but it seems that she has the backing of most of the Democrats. For our weekly focus this week, we have our presidential correspondent Oh Soo-young in the studio to discuss what's ahead and the possible implications for America's allies. Welcome, Soo-young.
Hi, Yoo-jin. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So let's first start with the Harris campaign. How is the transition going?
Right, so almost immediately, I would say, the Biden campaign turned into the Harris campaign with the blessing of various senior Democrats, including the Clintons, former Secretary of State John Kerry, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Over $80 million were raised within a day of Harris announcing her run for presidency, marking the highest 24-hour fundraising of any candidate in U.S. history. She raised over $100 million as of Tuesday evening, with more than 1.1 unique million donors. So despite assumptions that there would be other possible challenges, it does seem that Kamala Harris will likely clinch the nomination unchallenged pretty much by August 7th, as the party is clearly getting behind her in the fight against Donald Trump.
So the ultimate question seems like, can Harris compete with former President Donald Trump? Because the former president has said that she'll be easier to beat than Biden.
Well, observers actually say that she's quite a formidable challenger for Donald Trump. A poll by Reuters and Ipsos shows that she is currently leading Trump 44% to his 42%. And this really compares to the previous week's poll, where Biden fell behind Trump with a marginal 2-point deficit. So if anything, I say that Donald Trump is probably sensing a greater sense of threat to his campaign with Kamala Harris as his main opponent. First of all, she is relatively younger than him at 59 years old compared to his 76. And second, she would represent the first US president to be a black and an Asian American woman at the same time. And during her career as a prosecutor, she was known as being very capable and rather tough on crime. And in recent months, it seems that she's been stepping up beyond the duties traditionally expected of the vice president to speak up on issues like abortion rights, the war in Gaza and race as well, making over 60 trips out of Washington, D.C. so far this year, according to the New York Times.
I think that she'll highlight the successes of the Biden administration, especially some of the bipartisan initiatives that he was able to get support for in terms of like the infrastructure bill. I think that as far as the reduction of inflation, the voters have made it clear what they want: a strong economy, continued low unemployment, reduction in inflation and gas prices. And I think those are the things that Biden and his administration can get criticism for. But I think that she's going to point out to the American voter that she is not Joe Biden, that even though she was his running mate, even though they served together for 4 years, there are some things that he achieved that she helped him achieve. But she is not just someone who was just his second person. She is going to be her own person. And she's going to focus on the things that the American voter is saying that he or she wants.
Harris admittedly does have some chinks in the armor when it comes to her lack of experience in foreign policy. Also, her involvement in border policy, which is, of course, one of Donald Trump's favorite target points. Trump, in his rally in North Carolina, he's already lashed out at Kamala Harris, calling her the worst vice president in history and more liberal than Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. He's even protested against her gaining access to the Biden campaign funds.
Well, I guess another big question is her running mate. So how would they help her take on Trump?
Right, well, that's what everybody wants to know at this point, right? Who her running mate is going to be. And indeed, there does seem to be a number of likely candidates. But the Harris campaign is going to have to decide very soon on the second name on their ticket, as the Democrats will begin voting on the nominee from August 1st until August 7th. According to Professor Austin, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly and Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania are quite likely choices.
Pennsylvania is a must-win state for her, and it has 20 electoral college votes, and she really needs to win that state. Josh Shapiro is a Democrat, very popular. He even is more popular than Joe Biden. He won by a significant margin, and so he would be a good person to have as her running mate. Mark Kelly hasn't been in the U.S. Senate for as long a period of time. He's only been there for a brief period of time, but he's very popular. His wife, Gabby Giffords, was in Congress. She was, shot while she was in Congress, and he received a lot of publicity for that, but also as an astronaut. He has some foreign policy experience. He has some military experience as well.
And so, last but not least, what do we know about her foreign policy and how would this affect the Korean Peninsula?
Right, so admittedly, she is relatively inexperienced when it comes to foreign affairs, but she's had opportunities to learn from the job, having visited more than 19 countries and meeting with more than 150 foreign leaders, according to the White House website. And also, she must have learned firsthand from Joe Biden, who's been a foreign policy president, and he's believed in restoring a rules-based global order, supporting Ukraine and the freedom of navigation, peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. It's therefore likely that she'll continue his policy of working closely with America's allies on strengthening cooperation between democracies and countering threats to global security by autocratic powers, especially when it comes to America's alliance with South Korea and their cooperation with Japan. Harris would most likely build up on their trilateral cooperation mechanism on security, economic security, semiconductors, AI, health, and other crucial areas. In fact, she has met with President Yoon Suk-yeol on various occasions, including when she made a solo trip to Seoul in 2022. Also, her husband, he even led a delegation to attend Yoon's inauguration ceremony earlier that year. Personally, I've heard her speaking very favourably about South Korean culture too. She's talked about receiving BTS at the White House and also how her niece is a fan of K-pop. When it comes to trade, Harris will also probably support Joe Biden's industrial policies, which are admittedly quite mercantilist in nature, and it does put some pressure on allies to invest in America. But she would presumably work with allies at the same time on strengthening economic cooperation and resilience against China in key areas like supply chains, AI, 6G, all under the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which Trump has threatened to scrap. When it comes to North Korea, Kamala Harris is likely to maintain the current administration's approach to Pyongyang as well, which is consistent in calling for denuclearization as well as human rights in the North, in line with Seoul's own audacious initiative. In 2019, she said that Trump was, quote, punked by Pyongyang as the former president failed to clinch a deal to denuclearize North Korea. So we're not going to be expecting any so-called love letters between Harris and Kim Jong-un. She's not going to claim to be best friends with Xi Jinping either, already having voiced her support for Taiwan.
So we have over 100 days until voters go to the polls, so we'll see what happens.
That's right. 3 months can be an eternity in politics, so we'll have to see.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for your report today, Soyoung. We really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Yoo-jin.
Shifting focus, tensions escalated further on the Korean peninsula last weekend, with North Korea sending another round of trash-filled balloons. In response, the South Korean military resumed full-scale propaganda loudspeaker broadcasts. Then on Wednesday, the regime flew its 10th round of balloons, with around 480 landing on South Korean territory. One of them landed on the Yongsan presidential compound in Seoul. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung walks us through the situation.
North Korea sent a 10th round of trash-carrying balloons to the south on Wednesday, and one of them landed within the compound of South Korea's presidential office. The Presidential Security Service said nothing dangerous was found after an investigation by its response team. But a presidential official said that the office is aware of the seriousness. The official added that the exact location of the balloon was tracked in real time before it dropped, and that it's monitoring the situation in cooperation with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The military has been refraining from shooting the balloons down in mid-air to prevent their contents from spreading and causing further damage. Since late May, North Korea sent more than 3,000 trash balloons to the south in protest against anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaigns by North Korean defectors in the south. And the provocations continue despite South Korea resuming full-scale propaganda loudspeaker broadcasts along the entire border for the 4th day in a row on Wednesday. The North appears to have begun blasting buzzing sounds through its loudspeakers as well to prevent North Korean soldiers and residents from hearing the South's propaganda broadcasts. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Now, to address South Korea's low birth rate, the government previously announced it would create a new senior presidential secretary position dedicated to tackling this issue. On Thursday, President Yoon appointed a university professor to this inaugural role. Our correspondent from the presidential office, Kim Do-yeon, has more on who this appointee is.
A mother of twin boys is now set to aid President Yoon Suk-yeol with one of the declared national emergencies, the low birth rate. On Thursday, the top office announced that Professor Yoo Hae-mi of Hanyang University's College of Economics and Finance has been chosen for this brand new senior secretary position that President Yoon created to tackle the current demographics crisis.
Yoo Hae-mi has been deeply studying the low birth rate issue in our country, focusing on how marriage and working spouses affect wages, how improving education and changes in the labor market impact economic growth, and how dual-income families divide childcare time.
The changes in population structure significantly impact economic growth, finance, employment, childcare, and welfare. Therefore, we will actively work on communication and preparation with various government departments. By assisting the president, we will do our utmost to help South Korea overcome the national population emergency and leap toward a hopeful future.
The new senior secretary is in her 40s with her boys still in elementary school. Important factors that the top office considered when filling in this new role. A working mother who's still involved in raising her children to relate best with other working moms in the nation.
With the expertise and experience accumulated over the years, along with a fresh perspective, as a senior secretary in their 40s, we expect to develop more fundamental and groundbreaking solutions to overcome the low birth rate problem.
Yoo is now set to advise President Yoon with creating a new powerful ministry to respond to the low birth rate. President Yoon announced this earlier this year, saying that the minister will be the Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs, something the current Education Minister serves as. In the meantime, there will be two secretaries under the new senior secretary, one for population coordination and one for tackling the low birth rate. Both positions were filled by career public officials to assist the new senior secretary. In the meantime, the new senior secretary also said, while new policies will be carried out to raise the birth rate, a significant decline in the working population is inevitable. Another task Yoo considers major. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Moving on to politics, South Korea's ruling People Power Party held its convention on Tuesday, electing a new party leader. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo highlights the PPP's leadership race.
Following 4 days of voting among eligible party members and other citizens, the People Power Party on Tuesday announced the final winners of its leadership race. Han Dong-un has been announced as the new leader of the ruling People Power Party at its national convention, winning a majority with over 320,000 votes. Han beat three other candidates, winning over 62% of the total votes cast. In his acceptance speech, Han vowed the party will respond more to the public sentiment.
Let's try to respond a little more to the people and change according to their standards.
In the short term, Han is tasked with leading the PPP through its agendas at the National Assembly, despite its minority status. In the long term, he is expected to prepare the party for the local election, set to take place in June of 2026, where the PPP will aim for more regional leadership posts. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol visited the event and delivered congratulatory words.
2024년 7월 23일 오늘 이 전당대회가 단결과 통합의 새 역사를 여는 자리로 기록될 것이라고 저는 믿습니다.
He added the future of the Conservative Party is in the hands of the party members. The PPP also announced 4 additional members to its Supreme Council. They are Kim Min-jeon, Kim Jae-won, In Yoo-han, and Jang Dong-hyuk. The party also announced Jin Jong-ho as its new Youth Supreme Council member designated for those under 45. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
And just a day after the ruling People Power Party convention, President Yoon Suk-yeol hosted the newly elected party leadership and called for a close unity between the top office and the ruling party. The event on Wednesday also was attended by the president's senior secretaries and by the candidates who didn't win their leadership bids. President Yoon also acknowledged those candidates for their hard work during the past month for their campaigns. He also asked the newly elected PPP chair Han Dong-un to show strong leadership while calling on everyone at the event to help Han lead the party. Han, in response, said he will work hard to make the Yoon administration successful and to win the next election as well. And one of the major news last week was on a South Korean consortium being named as the preferred bidder for building 2 nuclear power plants in the Czech Republic. The 2 countries will establish a government hotline and hold regular meetings to coordinate nuclear energy cooperation. According to President Yoon's office, his 2 envoys sent to Prague met with the Czech Prime Minister on Wednesday, local time. As they delivered Yoon's letter of gratitude, Prime Minister Petr Fiala reiterated his congratulations for Korea hydro and nuclear power being selected as a preferred bidder. The 2 countries agreed to install a hotline between their respective industry ministries to support follow-up measures. President Yoon is expected to visit Prague in September to further discuss the project. On the economic front, the Bank of Korea reported that South Korea's GDP in the second quarter recorded its worst performance in a year and a half. However, the central bank said it's too early to be disappointed. Our economics correspondent Park Gun-woo breaks down the digits.
South Korea's real gross domestic product fell in the second quarter of 2024, dropping by 0.2% from the previous quarter. That's according to advanced estimates released by the Bank of Korea on Thursday. It's the biggest fall in on-quarter growth since a 0.5% drop in real GDP in the fourth quarter of 2022. The BOK says the fall in GDP in the second quarter of this year is due to the base effect, due to a strong first quarter, as well as a lower level of private consumption and construction investment. It also said annual growth will still reach its earlier targets when considering the overall growth rate for the first half of the year.
It's hard to say the economy got worse just because it grew a lot in the first quarter and then shrank in the second quarter. The economy grew 2.8% in the first half of the year, and if the latter half grows by 2.2% as predicted, that leads to an annual growth rate calculation of 2.5%. The economic growth is in line with the annual growth target set earlier.
The BOK also spoke about other factors behind the fall in real GDP in the second quarter. Private consumption dropped by 0.2% on quarter as spending on goods, including motor vehicles and clothing, declined. Construction investment also contracted by 1.1%, while exports saw a rise of 0.9% on quarter, mainly due to car and chemical product exports. There was also a 1.2% rise in imports. The central bank said domestic demand will be able to recover in the near future as they forecast exports to keep increasing and high costs to possibly stabilize. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Now to some good news. The world's second largest memory chip maker, SK Hynix, reported its highest quarterly profit in 6 years on the back of robust AI semiconductor sales. In the April to June period, the company posted an operating profit of 5.46 trillion won, or around $3.95 billion. Now, this is the largest quarterly operating profit for the company since the third quarter of 2018, when it reported $4.67 billion. Compared with the company's loss of around $2 billion a year earlier, its revenue surged 124.8% to a record $11.84 billion. According to SK Hynix, demand for AI server memories is expected to continue to rise in the second half of the year, which means sales of high-performance memory products will continue to increase. And now turning our attention to the Paris 2024 Summer Olympic Games. Just like last week, we'll introduce some of the sports and athletes to keep an eye on. Starting with swimming, Team Korea swimmers are being hailed as the so-called golden generation of the sport. At last year's Hangzhou Asian Games, South Korea delivered its best performance ever, clinching 6 gold, 6 silver, and 10 bronze medals. Remarkably, Kim Woo-min and Hwang Sun-woo won 5 of those golds. Now this time, these two athletes are not just aiming for individual glory, but are also focused on the team events, aiming to secure Korea's first ever Olympic swimming team event medal.
We're focusing a lot on the 800-meter freestyle relay. The 6 of us are working well together on strategies and race planning to show great performances and results in Paris.
And next up, badminton. South Korea has set its sights on improving on its past performances, having won a bronze medal in each of the last 3 Summer Olympics. The spotlight is on current women's singles world number 1, An Se-young, who took home the gold at the Hangzhou Asian Games.
Preparing for the Olympics has been incredibly challenging. Given the immense support and attention I've received, I realized the only way to give back is through my performance. So, I focused thoroughly on overcoming my injury and perfecting my badminton skills.
And Korea is also aiming for gold in women's doubles and mixed doubles in Paris. But the Olympics isn't just about sports. It's also a wonderful opportunity to experience and understand different cultures. This time, visitors have plenty of chances to explore and enjoy K-culture. Take a look. Paris has been transformed into a stage for one of the world's largest sports spectacles, the Olympics. But there's more to Paris this summer than just the Olympics. Known as the global capital of fashion and culture, Paris boasts a rich history that spans centuries. Living up to its reputation, visitors to Paris during the Games will get a taste of diverse cultures, including Korea's.
Korean culture has gained immense popularity worldwide thanks to the Korean wave. We hope that Korean art and culture will flourish here in Paris, the city of art and the host of the Olympics.
The Culture Ministry has already kicked off its Korea Season project in France, launching a wide range of cultural programs in May. South Korea aims to showcase both its traditional and contemporary culture to the world from the very start of Paris 2024. A major highlight of any Olympics is the national team uniforms worn at the opening and closing ceremonies. This is Team Korea's Paris 2024 Olympic uniform. A light-weighted belt setup designed by the Korean brand Mushinsa Standard.
We heard that the weather in Paris is very hot, so we used a type of wool in our own cooling textile. We chose the color of Pyeongchang to highlight Korean traditional beauty. It represents the East and a dynamic, young energy. For the lining of the jacket, we used 청아백자, the blue and white porcelain patterns. The belt is a reinterpretation of a traditional belt called dakdae.
There are even more opportunities to experience Korean culture outside the Olympic venues. At the heart of Paris is Korea House, run by the Culture Ministry and the Korean Sports and Olympic Committee. This venue has been set up at the Olympic host city since Athens 2004, mostly hosting media events such as medalist press conferences. Due to COVID-19, the past two Olympics in Beijing and Tokyo did not have one. This time, Korea House is back, bigger and better.
Even in the digital age, first-hand experiences are key to enjoying and consuming culture. This Korea House is the largest ever, with spectators attending the Olympics fully in person again for the first time in 6 years, and the Games returning to Paris after a century. We're expecting big crowds. We anticipate a growing global interest in K-culture through Korea House, providing a great chance for those who are unfamiliar to learn more about it.
Until August 11th, there'll be a wide array of exhibitions, K-pop classes, dance performances, and K-food events. One of the highlights is an outdoor booth resembling a Korean street market, 시장.
France has its own market culture called marché, so we chose the 시장 theme to make the experience relatable to locals. At the same time, we wanted to introduce Korea's energetic, convenient, and affordable 시장 food culture to the world. That's why we're serving Korean street food like 주먹밥 rice balls and mandu dumplings.
From these authentic experiences to the Olympic uniforms and, of course, through the Games, Korea is set to make its presence better known in Paris. And that's all for Weekly News Highlights this week. Thank you for watching, and on behalf of all of us here at Arirang, hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.